Good afternoon, everybody. Rob Woodman here from Ferguson Waterworks. It is great to have you all with us. It's a great, large crowd, which we're really thankful for. And on behalf of Ferguson Waterworks and Porous Technologies, we welcome you. A lot of familiar names on this webinar today and a lot of new folks too. So if you haven't come across any of the three of us before, it's certainly a pleasure to meet you, and I'm glad you're with us. I'm going to be kicking off the presentation, talking a little bit about green infrastructure in general, and then hand it over to Greg and Will with Porous Technologies to talk a little bit about this urban rain garden, which we are really excited about. I personally served as a civil engineer in the consulting world for about 10 years, and then about 7 years ago, jumped over to this crazy world of products and solutions, and have had recently the opportunity to take on the role at Ferguson Waterworks to become the national manager for our urban green infrastructure specialty group, and really stoked about the partnership that we are forging and forming with Porous Technologies and the various solutions that they have. The connection for Ferguson Waterworks to this system today is really that we are the distributor of this product. So if you're looking for where Ferguson Waterworks has locations, we are a nationwide company all across the country with distribution centers and waterworks locations, as you can see on the map right here. In terms of today's presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what green infrastructure is, chat about some of the typical challenges with incorporating green stormwater infrastructure into urban or city environments. And then I'll hand things over to Greg, who'll talk a little bit about the great business he's built over the last couple of decades with Porous Technologies. And then he will transition over to Will, who will be introducing many of the technical features and benefits of the Urban Raingarden system. I should note, as did our MC, that if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box, and the three of us will be monitoring those as we go along, and some will be held to the end to go through in a little question and answer session. And we can also send out certificates to attendees, so that's something that will happen in the weeks to come with the large audience we have on, about 250 people right now. That'll take a little while to go through, but that's something we will send out. So what is green infrastructure? Green infrastructure means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I'm sure many people on the call today are familiar with this concept, and some have maybe dived in deeper than others. Some may be just dipping their toes in it, but it's a very flexible term. Low impact development green infrastructure means a lot of different things to different people. Let's go to just a very basic definition. According to the US EPA, green infrastructure is a cost-effective, resilient approach to managing wet weather impacts that provides many community benefits. As it sort of compares to a traditional gray infrastructure, when you're looking at conventional pipe drainage and water treatment systems, green infrastructure reduces and treats water at its source while delivering a lot of those co-benefits, or the triple bottom line benefits of environmental, social, and economic. And then as it relates to green infrastructure itself, generally we're looking at using vegetation, soils, and other elements and practices to restore some natural processes required to manage water and create healthier urban environments. At a city or county scale, green infrastructure is a patchwork of natural areas that provide habitat, flood protection, cleaner air, and cleaner water. But when we think a lot about green infrastructure and the typical techniques, and I guess a couple of definitions for today: GSI, green stormwater infrastructure. And then we use the word BMP, if that's a new one, that stands for best management practice. When we think about the typical techniques for green infrastructure, there's many of them, rainwater harvesting, rain gardens, planter boxes, alleys, green parking areas, urban tree canopies, these types of things. And what I've found is that there's a lot of great data sheets out there and guidance for these types of systems, but a lot of them are kind of geared towards either residential applications or where you have a lot of space, but you don't always have a lot of space. When we get into the urban or the built environment, there are a series of complexities that make green stormwater infrastructure a lot more challenging to incorporate. You're dealing with tighter spaces, so less room to work, less room to get your system installed and done. You're dealing with working around existing infrastructure, so maybe other utilities and conflicts, or maybe even new infrastructure and utilities that you're putting in at the same time that maybe this green infrastructure system is being deployed. You may be, in a green streetscape where construction may be affecting local business, and where, the timeliness or the, short project cycles are really important, so these businesses can stay open and, continue to, make money and grow their own businesses. And then a lot of these city programs, there's the need for long-term monitoring and metrics and these types of things that come in play. When it comes to green infrastructure specifically, or surface green infrastructure, there's a need often for these systems not just to be functional, i.e. process the stormwater, or treat the stormwater, or store the stormwater and send it on, but also to have that high aesthetic value, to be that feature. And along with any sort of stormwater BMP or anything in life comes maintenance challenges. Now, every city is kind of doing their own thing, right? Looking at their city right-of-ways, their green streetscapes, or their streetscapes, and saying, how can we fold these kind of components in? And everybody's embracing them in slightly different ways. And there are many programs, local municipal GSI programs out there throughout the country that are kind of looking at green infrastructure in different and some similar ways as well. When we look at Philadelphia, the Green City Clean Waters program, a very high-profile program that's got a lot of attention. They have a great program with a lot of different types of technologies and a lot of different types of BMP styles, stormwater bump outs, deep tree planting areas, rain gardens, subsurface storage pits, these types of things to account for the different challenges from one street to the next. New York City, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the program in New York City, looking at traditionally a lot of use of the right-of-way bioswales and infiltration basins, where kind of deploying a very similar kind of look to that patchwork throughout the city there. So sort of simplifying it into a couple of key options, obviously coming with some challenges that are associated with, curb line BMPs, trash and debris, those types of things. Then you go over to Pittsburgh, PWSA, a great little program there on the green infrastructure side. Pittsburgh has the added challenge of having very steep streets. So it's a very different dynamic out there compared to Philadelphia, where a lot of these BMPs end up becoming terraced with internal baffle walls to separate the stormwater into little chunks as you work your way down the street in a variety of really creative ways that a lot of folks in Pittsburgh have incorporated GSI features into a lot of typical public improvement projects. You can see a really nice little park project here. And then DC, and then, look, there's programs all over the world. I'm just focusing on a few today, but DC, their primary GSI BMPs are the permeable pavement or the permeable alleyways, and then also centerline or curb line bioretention systems. So it's interesting to see all these folks sort of navigate different ways to deploy these types of systems in their areas. And at Ferguson Waterworks, we've kind of spent a while developing a suite of solutions to address a lot of the key challenges in this space. So we know that whatever system we bring to the market, we need to be space efficient. That's so important. We need to be versatile and flexible. So we have to be able to work with some site-specific constraints and challenges. We can't be just a fixed shape or size. We need to be high performance, whether that's for water quality treatment, whether that's for structural performance, whatever that may be. Easy to maintain. Maintenance is such an important part of the conversation, and Greg's going to share a little bit about his experience and journey through learning more and more about what it takes to maintain these types of systems. And then, of course, cost appropriate. So these are kind of the pillars that we're kind of working with. And then the final one, which has probably become one of the biggest things I'm seeing in urban GSI programs, is the need for better pre-treatment to protect a lot of these curb line BMPs so they continue to function. Maintenance is easier, and we increase the longevity of the primary BMP asset that's directly behind that pre-treatment. So at Ferguson, we divide our stormwater products and solutions into 4 primary categories: space-efficient storage, filters and screens, media and biofiltration, and then finally, alternative surfaces or permeable or porous surfaces. We're going to be focused in the media and the biofiltration kind of segment today. And when we look at these different buckets that we can pick from as engineers, the landscape architects, designers, municipalities, oftentimes folks are just using one, just looking at the storage, just looking at the filters and the screens, whatever it may be. But you can also kind of put those things together. And what's really exciting with this Urban Raingarden that you're going to see today is it really emulates a lot of the importance of pre-treatment, treatment, and having all the framework and pieces that you need to have a fully functional urban stormwater BMP. And with that, I'd love to hand it over to my friend Greg Novick to talk a little bit about his great company he's built over the last couple of years or a couple of decades.
Well, thanks, Rob. Great job setting the table today on sort of the background on why we need not only biofiltration, but also we need to focus on the urban setting where we have tight sites and it's difficult to find the space. I'm going to take a step back and kind of give you a history. I want you folks to know that this product, while it seems very simple, there's a lot that has gone in behind this. It wasn't developed in a vacuum, and we have a lot of experience. And through that experience, direct experience, working with green infrastructure programs, especially here in the Northeast. I'm sitting here in north of Portland, Maine right now. But with our experience here in the Northeast, we were able to kind of take that beyond and recognize, looking at other GI and LID programs throughout the country, that, hey, I think we've got something that might work all around the country and not just in the Northeast. So let me kind of talk about the progression. So Porous Technologies, we have a couple of companies. We actually have an inspection and maintenance company. About 15 years ago, I started Stormwater Compliance, which is a post-construction stormwater inspection and maintenance company. For you folks in the Northeast and sort of the high end of the Mid-Atlantic, Eastern Pennsylvania, all of the Northeast, is sort of our service area. So Stormwater Compliance basically will work post-construction and go out and keep any site in compliance with their inspection and maintenance manuals. So we've been doing this for a number of years and gained a ton of experience. And of course, we're headquartered and located up here in Maine, and have run into the challenge and have a number of customers that call us with issues with regard to porous pavement. Porous pavement is becoming more and more popular, especially here in the Northeast. But people are running into issues with their porous pavement. So what we did was we developed our own maintenance equipment. This is called the Stormwater SUV. It's a ride-on vacuum machine, good for alleyways, small areas, tight areas. We use a Stuart Amos. We own a fleet of regenerative air machines where we need larger areas, doing parking lots and the like. So we use a Stuart Amos regenerative air machine. We even developed a deep cleaning pickup head that we can place onto the stormwater SUV that attaches to a Vector truck. This is a whole nother presentation that we're happy to do for your office someday, but we kind of became the go-to porous pavement folks. And, you know, we never got phone calls saying, hey, we've had porous pavement for 10 or 15 years. It's working great. Can you come here and inspect it and maintain it? We typically get phone calls saying, hey, we've had porous pavement for 10 years. We've never done anything. The municipality finally came and looked at it and said, we probably have to rip it out. It's plugged. So we were able to come in and help them and develop methods. But this is what we continually saw over and over. Here's some porous concrete, not even porous. A porous asphalt pour that just didn't go so well. Porous pavers again. So through our experience, we kind of thought, hey, there's got to be a better way. So we came up with an idea called Stormcrete, which is a precast porous concrete slab. I am not going to spend much time or really any time talking about this today, other than just to introduce it, let you know it exists. But now we're manufacturing porous concrete under controlled conditions in a plant. The slabs have lifting points in the surface and they're removable and replaceable. So again, between Rob, myself, Will, and the rest of our team, we're happy to come in and speak to your group one-on-one or as a group and talk about the Stormcrete product. Of course, porous pavement, we do parking lots, all the typical applications. Here's an alleyway we did in Anaheim. I like to show these sidewalk applications, and this is sort of some New York City work we did. And this is my lead into how we evolved into a bioswell or a biofiltration company. Through all our experience, here's some more New York work, and in working in New York, they're developing a gutter line application. Rob showed you some of the bioswells that they're doing in New York. They're starting to run into problems with conflicts in the sidewalk behind the gutter line. So now they're looking within the right of way for ways to get rid of their stormwater, and they're looking at porous pavement. So we've spent years, 10 years, working with New York City in their GI program, and here they've even developed a standard for precast porous concrete pavement in the gutter line. But through our experience and working with contractors, getting demonstration projects and working with the city, we also were very involved in the entire green infrastructure program in New York, and recognized our contractors were struggling in the field a little bit, pouring what's ended up now. They have about 8,000 to 10,000 assets now in New York already built. So they were literally had contracted to build hundreds of bioswales in a 9 to 12 month period. So they were challenged to pour these in place. We recognized the issues, and we actually developed and precast all the parts to the New York City bioswale for them. And the contractors liked it, and we ended up supplying thousands of these into New York City over the last few years. But we have the advantage, and here you can see the contractors like the fact that we were able to palletize and place all the bits and pieces on a couple of pallets, and that was that bioswale, and they were able to just assemble it in the field. Again, these are live streets. These are retrofits. They need to get these streets open quickly. You've got these open pits until they get the concrete in and precast placed and cured. So now you're leaving, if a storm comes through, you've got these open holes. By going with precast, they were able to install and close up the hole very quickly, get the streets back open. So this really turned out to be a great thing. We had the advantage, here's a couple of more pictures in New York. Some of the parts we provided, other than the curb here, we provided all the precast pieces for the bioswale. So now we started looking around the country and said, hey, we know what's going on in New York, and here's a picture of New York's design, but now we're seeing others where we've got these straight walls. New York had straight walls initially and started having some issues with settling and also with the walls tipping a little bit, so they flared out their walls. A lot of these designs really just have the straight walls. And we had the advantage of being able to study all these different systems, and we kind of took the best of a number of worlds. We looked at Los Angeles, we looked at New York, and figured we want to make sure that whatever we do will fit into that. And lo and behold, once we designed it, we realized that we work for just about every municipal LID or green infrastructure manual with regard to their biofiltration systems, or some people call them planters. So the Urban Raingarden was born. The Urban Raingarden, what we've done is we've created our own wall. We'll get into the details, but we've created a T-wall so that we can resist any settling, any tipping. We have knockouts within the wall to allow roots out if we're using it for trees. There's a number of features that Will's going to go into right now. So I just kind of want to give you the background that we've been doing this a long time. We started with a maintenance company, and with an eye for maintenance, we recognize the need for pre-treatment, like Rob discussed, so you can concentrate all the pollutants in one location and then have one easy place to clean them afterwards. And through all our maintenance experience, kind of developed that porous pavement product. From that, it kind of morphed into a second porous product for us called the Urban Raingarden. And with that, I'm going to mute and let Will.
Thank you, Greg. That was great. And that really dovetails into what I'm going to showcase on the features and benefits of the Urban Raingarden. And right now, I'm having a little problem sharing my screen. I think you need to give me control back, Greg, if I can get that for a second. Stand by. Having a little difficulty. With the remote control.
Will, I think you have it. Try clicking through now.
Okay. Nope, it's still, there we go. Got it. Thank you. So a little bit about the Urban Raingarden, and let me get rid of this screen up here for a second. Thank you. I'm going to take you through the features and benefits of the Urban Raingarden and a little bit about the West Coast perspective as well, so that you can gain an understanding of how this system was developed and why. The primary purpose of the system is to give and deliver a system to an engineer or to a contractor that's something simple to design, something with different options, and is also non-proprietary. And what I mean by that, this system can be applied in any jurisdiction across the country, as Greg alluded to, as something that is functionally equivalent to all standard types of bioretention system designs or guidelines, whether it's in the city of LA or LA County, the San Francisco Bay Area, or if it's located in New York or in Virginia. But the beauty of the system is that it does offer a number of different options that I'm going to take you through briefly. One of them being the major one is the precast T-wall sections, which we'll get into a little more detail on that in a moment. Also, as Rob mentioned earlier, as well as Greg, one of the major issues and challenges around maintenance for any type of a rain garden system is treatment and pre-treatment and maintenance. With the Urban Rain Garden, we offer a system called the Raingardian as a pre-treatment system, or the designer or engineer has the option of using other types of pre-treatment. You're not necessarily required to use a particular device or system, but we have the option of available as a package pre-treatment about the Raingardian in a moment. The garden baffle, something new that a lot of you are probably not familiar with, but we're going to learn more about a vertical precast porous concrete baffle wall, which is particularly useful at being able to detain water in different sections of a planter or place on a slope to be able to slow that water down. And also in terms of offering different outlet and bypass and overflow options, this system allows for the use of a beehive grate with an under drain, or if you don't want to use a beehive grate and you want this planter to be simply infiltrating water through, that's another option. With plants and mulch option, we've given the most latitude for landscape architects to use any type of localized or native deciduous plants in this system. Again, you're not required to use a limited plant list for Urban Rain Garden. You can also go without any plants depending on what type of media you're using inside the system. It does offer infiltration and retention as in an open bottom or closed bottom. This is a feature. It all depends on what soil types that you're dealing with at the job site. And in terms of soil medias, what makes this a different product compared to proprietary systems, which is something I'm most familiar with after the past 20 years, dealing in the proprietary system world, using any type of soil media was one of the major options that engineers wanted to be able to use. In this case, the Urban Rain Garden will allow engineers to use or specify whatever prescribed or particular soil media may be applied that's locally sourced and available. A reservoir stone that, again, is locally available to use under the actual soil media in a variety of different locations, which again, all of this can be garnered through Ferguson since they have offices nationwide and they have local resources nationwide. Finally, if you want to enhance your storage so that you can obtain a higher amount of volume capture inside the system, there is a design for an R-tank modular storage system that can be placed and incorporated in a design. So we'll briefly go through some of those. On the right-hand side, you'll see that the Urban Rain Garden can be designed in a variety of different configurations.
I think you may have frozen.
How's that?
All right, we're in the interconnecting wall now. Is that where we want to be?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, that's okay. So again, getting back to the interconnecting T-wall, this is probably one of the major features of the Urban Rain Garden, is that T-walls that we design are precast concrete walls that are 6 inches thick at the top and the edges, and on the bottom, we have an 8-inch base. So it's that way it can offer a very stable location, and they're connected by a turnbuckle, which again can allow for a different configuration and allow for the walls to be interconnected. The footings actually prevent any type of settling, so that's why they're 8 inches thick. There is no crane required, so it makes it very simple for a contractor to be able to place the T-walls in the ground. We also offer the option of knockouts for the allowance of larger trees or shrubs for root expansion, or if you don't want to use the knockouts, we don't have to create them either. The walls actually come in 2 different sizes, in 4 feet long and 6 feet long, and they can either be 3 feet high or 4 feet high. So that way your dimensions and your sizes are not dependent on having built all these different sizes of walls. Using 2 standard sizes makes it very easy to design any shape, length, width, or size of system that you desire. This is showing an illustration of the interconnected T-walls placed on a radius. So you're not limited to have to make a rectangular type of design or a box design. If you want to create a radius, you can do so with the actual interconnected T-walls. We do have an example of a general detail here, but this is not the only detail we have available. We offer free engineering support services at Porous Technologies, and we want to work with this engineering community so that we can provide them with a design detail that specifically fits their particular project application. And with the Urban Raingarden design, the basic design features are shown here, so that if you wish to incorporate an enclosed system with an underdrain and also with a beehive, you can do so, or we can leave it without. All of these other optional features will go through that being incorporated in a final design, but we do have general design details. We also have a sizing guideline available for engineers to review that can then allow for the actual sizing features to be able to capture a particular volume or flow that may be required for capture in that jurisdiction. And again, those design details can be provided by us as long as we have the basic information on what the volume capture requirements are for that particular location, or if you have a site plan that we can work with and provide you with that particular design. One of the major benefits of using the Urban Raingarden is the actual infiltration footprint. What we've done in creating this is give an engineer an opportunity to use a larger footprint instead of being limited to just the planting surface area. And by doing so, we're taking that stone and we're placing it surrounding the actual T-wall base. That allows for more storage to allow for capture of that water. And therefore, you're not limited to just using a small planting surface footprint and limit the amount of area that you have for that planter. This is particularly important in areas like in downtown LA or up in the San Francisco Bay Area, or in terms of using this in very large urban settings that would then you be limited to be able to space these on a particular street corner, or it may be placed as a bump out. It may be you want to place these in a small square where there's limited parking available and limited surface area to place a planter. You can still call out and be able to use that infiltration footprint with the actual stone that's placed underneath the planter. Give you an idea of a cross section here, and this is just an example cross section. Again, this shows the T-walls at 6 inches thickness. Underneath we recommend using a 57 reservoir coast stone. But in terms of the actual biofiltration soil media, again, you're not limited to using different types of biofiltration soil media, nor are you limited to just using a particular depth. We're just showing 18 inches here as an example, and very typical of a lot of locations around the country. But if you want to make your biofiltration soil layer 12 inches or more, or 24 inches, you have that ability to do so. And then, of course, your mulch layer going on top. Your ponding depth can vary as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be at 6, 9, or 12 inches. It all depends on what your site conditions are and what the local municipality allowance and limits may be. So we give that complete latitude to the engineer. Rob mentioned earlier about the need for pre-treatment. We believe that is really a strong philosophy that we incorporate into the Urban Raingarden. We actually offer a device called the Raingardian, which is a pre-treatment device for bioretention systems generally, a company based out of the Midwest. We distribute their products on the West Coast. And the Urban Raingarden is a great pre-treatment device for capturing gross pollutants like trash, debris, and sediment. And it can be incorporated upstream of the Urban Raingarden so that as flows enter along, let's say, a curb line, you'd be able to convey that water through the Raingardian first, so that the trash and debris and sediment gross pollutants are captured initially before water can continue through a filter screen and go into the actual Urban Raingarden in such a way. This is a great feature for those who are concerned about maintenance of a planter system. Here, you'll be able to incorporate a pre-treatment system that would be able to be maintained right there at the curb line or in a parking lot area at the entry of the rain garden itself. The garden baffle. It's something that we invented at Porous Technologies, and Greg Novick spent a lot of time in the design of this. This is basically taking a standard stormcrete precast porous concrete panel and turning it vertically. And once turning it vertically can then be incorporated really as a baffle wall. And the nice part about it is it's a porous baffle wall. So the water can weep through the actual porous wall itself as it drains down. So it allows for the system not only to be able to be used as a forebay, a detention area up front in the planter, but it will also allow for all that water to drain down in the appropriate depth time. You can set the ponding depth for this, as well as for the bypass. But what's most important is that it will allow for the even distribution of water over the entire filter surface area, and thus eliminate short circuiting. Here's a good example of how it can be used in creating a serpentine flow path. With the baffle walls on each side, you're able to allow for that water to cross all the way through, thus preventing rutting. Rutting is a major problem with a lot of planter systems that are currently operating throughout the country right now. To prevent that rutting, you can use the garden baffle, which is a significant benefit for those who are concerned about the longevity of rain gardens. In terms of placing these on slopes, this is really where the garden baffle plays a key role as a check dam to allow for water to easily and gently flow through the system rather than rush down a slope. So we've created a table up in the upper left-hand corner here, which provides as a guideline to be able to space out those baffle walls appropriately, depending on what the slope may be. And this is just an example of using it up to a 5% slope. Again, every single project that we work with engineers on is different. So therefore, there may be a different slope and a different condition, in which case we can help the engineer design the system so it has the appropriate baffle wall materials. So getting over to all these different options I mentioned earlier, there are a ton of options, and you're not limited to having to use a particular type of design. You can make this a closed bottom, an open bottom. If you're going to incorporate an underdrain system and you need more storage, we can incorporate a R-tank modular detention system underneath the bioretention soils. We can incorporate the garden baffle, even fencing. All these materials are available with Ferguson, and they're a great distribution line across the country. But again, it all starts with a design, and before it gets to the contractor, it's important that we work up front first with the engineer. When it finally gets down to the ordering and after the specifications are made and the contractor is ready to go, it's all about delivery. And one of the major advantages is that with Ferguson, we can deliver a packaged urban rain garden very quickly, much faster than you would be able to obtain all these materials from different sources and be able to do this poured in place. So that's my message, and I am going to turn this back over to Rob so that he'll be able to chat a little more about Ferguson's wherewithal.
For sure. Thank you, Will. Nice job, sir. Yeah, we're rushing through. I've noticed there's some really good questions in the chat box. Greg and I have been busy responding to many of those, a lot of similar themes coming up. So we'll go into those in just a little bit, because I think there's a number of questions that are kind of overlapping each other, and I think they're pretty simple to resolve. Yeah, so again, Ferguson is serving as the distributor for this product. I know there's some questions in the chat about, costs and some of those logistical type things. Reach out to us, either your local Ferguson yard. I put my email in the chat box too, and you'll see it on the final slide. And actually, Will, I'll have you click through to that slide there. So you'll see all of our emails on there, so you can grab those. We'll also provide them as part of the follow-up. But we can provide pricing for various regions. It all depends a little bit, depends on where you are relative to our plants and things like that. But we're ready to serve you. Like Will just mentioned, we at Ferguson have a whole suite of different solutions. So all the different accessories that we talked about, whether that's the Rain Guardians, or whether that's the R-tank that Will mentioned there, or even we have a high flow modular biofiltration system, the focal point that could be built right inside of it if you're space limited. there's a lot of options there. Ferguson Waterworks also provides the full, pipe, valves, and fittings product line. So, lateral underdrain pipe connections, all those sorts of things that might go along. We should have all the parts and pieces that you need. And we're offering convenience here, I think, is a big thing here. Obviously, when it comes to right away green infrastructure BMPs, there are options to buy large boxes that you need a crane for. There are options to cast in place. Some of those options will take a lot of time, whether it's on the lead time, whether it's on the installation difficulty, whether it's on just potentially disturbance to businesses and things like that. So this modular T-wall approach, we're pretty excited about. It gives you a lot of flexibility. And one general statement I make in terms of many of the questions, a lot of questions about whether this is NJCAT approved or whether this is.
I was gonna touch on that too, Rob. Will, can you put your slideshow back up again? I closed it by mistake. I want to put something on the screen. I'm trying to share.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob. You can.
Yeah, no worries. So
I'll answer.
Yeah. So essentially, we're not providing the media. We're not providing the mulch. There's a couple of questions in the mulch too. We're providing this T-wall system with a lot of really cool accessories, whether that's the rain guardian for the pre-treatment, whether that's the baffle wall for the forebay or for the serpentine patterns, the domed overflow potentially for internal bypass flow. But the beauty of this system is whether you have a media that you like using or whether you have a media that you're required to use, whether it's state standard or a local municipal county standard, you can build your local rain garden or your local bioretention section into this system. We're just providing a very convenient modular formwork or framework or border to that.
I use the word skeleton. We're providing the skeleton, and you're going to put your biofiltration system that works locally for you in here. We can adjust the depths. We can adjust the storage volume. We can adjust the soil media. You're going to use the local soil media that's called out in the local LID or green infrastructure manual. You're going to call out local plants. Somebody said, somebody said they just recently saw a presentation where you shouldn't put trees in the middle of it. Then I suggest not putting trees in the middle of it. It's up to you. It's your design. You pick the type of plantings, the type of material that goes in, the media. We'll just provide all the engineering that goes behind it, that goes in with the baffle wall. A few questions around the porous baffle wall. We're taking a stormcrete panel that we're used to putting in the roadway, in the gutter, in live streets in New York City. Now we're turning it perpendicular and putting it in a rain garden. We do pretty well in the streets with regard to plugging. In this application, if any sediment were to kind of be in the face of the wall as the water level drops, the sediment will drop off and slough off with it. We have something like 1,000 inch an hour flow rate for these panels when they're brand new. It will be a long time coming before these panels need any real maintenance. That said, a simple pressure washer right on the face at the surface there would take care of it. So it would be easy enough to maintain that. We had the question, we do have a functionally equivalent approval with the porous pavement in Washington, and we're just about ready to get our functional equivalent approval in from Washington DOE, which kind of reinforces the point. Like we said, we're just taking our skeleton and we're sticking in the Washington State DOE rain garden or biofiltration, or I think they call it a planter out there. So it's a street planter that we're getting approval for. And lo and behold, they asked us to come back and take a second look at their surface sand filter design, and that we can configure this as a sand filter as well, housing all the different parts and pieces, and again, providing pre-treatment for the sand filter here at the front end. So we've got a great pre-treatment device, but frankly, if you don't want to use it, then use riprap. Everything's optional. Outlet, weir wall, your media, everything you see is just optional. So we can work with you, design this out, and make it really quick and easy to build. Again, one of the biggest benefits that I like to point out is that these are going in on Green Street projects in many cases. These are almost in every case a retrofit, and time is of the essence. So if we can eliminate having holes open for a long time and have that hole open for 1 or 2 less flash storms in the summer, because you use precast elements versus trying to pour in place and having to wait around for all all the cure time with open pits along the street. This allows you to get in and out, close your street up, get it open to traffic, and move on using all generic local parts. Any
Yeah,
more questions there that I missed? What do you see in there, Rob?
Yeah, there's a couple there. If you want to take a quick minute, I'll talk for a second while you kind of scroll through there.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, again, questions about mulch. If hardwood mulch doesn't make sense in your geography, maybe use pine needles, maybe use something else. Maybe you don't even need mulch at all in your section. That's okay. We're just showing that as sort of a generic, sort of some typical components we see along these types of systems. When there's a couple of questions in there about water quality as well. Again, we're not claiming anything from a water quality standpoint. We're really just providing that urban housing, or that skeleton, as Greg said a couple of times, to install your system that does have maybe reliable data, either recognized by the state or on the proprietary side, recognized for its specific media performance and those types of things. But what's nice about this slide that's on the screen right now, and this, not only represents some of what I've learned over the last few years, but what Greg and Will have learned, in their business on the maintenance side. They've realized that there are all these little widgets or all these little pieces that you can add to these systems that are going to help with maintenance and are going to help with long-term performance. And when I say performance, that's not necessarily a water quality claim. That's more that these systems will continue to function as designed moving forward. So yeah, it's all optional. You could just do the T-walls and do everything else the way you want to do it. But the rain guardian, the pre-treatment part, we're seeing that such a consistent theme in so many of these cities, the struggle with how do you dissipate some of the erosive velocity? How do you collect some of that sediment debris when you don't have room for typical forebay or grass filter strip or anything like that? Then you get into the system, the idea of being able to have those baffles that are porous. So even though, you're trying to stop water maybe and work in certain levels, it's still over time able to drain down and move through the system. The ability to have forebays, the ability to have an internal overflow, the ability to enhance the underdrain. These are all things that both on the Ferguson and my previous company, ACF, before we were acquired by Ferguson, we've learned a lot about the intricacies and importance of those things. Greg's seen that on the maintenance side. And so it's kind of cool to have a system now on the board where we can kind of have the option, at least, to acknowledge a lot of those challenges and try to fold them into.
If I could just reiterate what I said earlier, is that this is really similar to being a design your own biofiltration system. And that's the way we wanted to design this, because being in the proprietary biofiltration world for so many years myself, engineers and contractors were limited, and landscape architects were limited with the options that they had. And in many cases, they were required to have an approval and get a permit from a product or a system that had to go through rigorous testing and verification from the Washington Department of Ecology to get a general use level designation, or from NJCAT, New Jersey Center of Advanced Technology. All those things are out the window with the Urban Raingarden. You don't need any of that. This is a system that is using functionally equivalent materials that are already prescribed within every jurisdiction, municipality around the country. So I just want to make sure that this is not a proprietary type system where you're using a prescriptive soils that had to go through rigorous testing. This is the soils you're using locally, right down at your local municipality. Greg?
I'm busy typing, answering questions here. I'm not even listening to you, Will.
Thanks.
There's so many great questions, so I'm just kind of going through them all. So you caught me, I guess. It keeps coming back. People keep asking a lot of questions around the are you approved, and around the media, and we just keep trying to go back on the fact that we're really just relying on the local jurisdiction's experience. We have a ton of experience on the maintenance side, as Rob Woodman pointed out. I really didn't talk a lot about the maintenance. At the end of the day, use a pre-treatment device, and the maintenance becomes very easy and becomes less often. The whole idea is to use that pre-treatment device. If not, you can use that baffle wall and allow hopefully most of the debris and sediment to settle out in that first forebay. Yes, sediment will settle out. Yes, you'll have to clean that forebay out, but hopefully you won't spread it out through the rest of the system. The idea is to try to contain it in that forebay. Even better yet is to contain it in the pre-treatment device. But we can set up that baffle really becomes an important piece, especially when you get into sloped areas, and also provides a really cool way to set up bypass in the road. It's really important, if you can, to bypass in the road and not to rely on an internal bypass. If you're relying on an internal bypass, then you're basically allowing all the trash and debris from the entire storm to come into your biofiltration system. Typically, you want to capture the first flush and the first flush debris. There's already street cleaners and other ways to treat trash and debris out in the street. You don't want your bioswale to become an open trash pit like we've seen so many times over and over again as a maintenance company. So between the baffle wall, at least hopefully holding some of that trash back behind the baffle wall. Obviously, the pre-treatment is the best way to go, but you can't do that always. So those are sort of the things. If we can eliminate the internal overflow, that can help keep a bunch of trash out of the system. And again, we will work with you and design these systems, with you, for you, and put together detailed drawings, both on the porous pavement side and obviously on the urban rain garden side. And please, stormcrete.com, www.stormcrete.com. I would love to come and present on the Stormcrete product. It complements the urban rain garden, or the urban rain garden complements the Stormcrete product very nicely with regard to Green Street programs. And again, it's a precast product. You're not relying with porous concrete. It's so temperamental. You're not relying on a contractor to do it. You're relying on us to do it under controlled conditions and bring it out pre-cured. Somebody asked about salt in the porous pavement. Because we pre-cure, we really have been able to, for the most part, mitigate any salt issues. It is salt in concrete. I'm not going to say it can't have an impact. I mean, salt has an impact on standard concrete, of course, but we haven't had a dramatic issue with that, and we're coming out of the Northeast with regard to that.
Yeah,
Greg,
a
couple of questions. I was going to just say a couple of questions that popped up about the radial application. So one question came in about when you do a radius, are you parging the spaces between, and if so, how does that hold up, especially as serving as a street curb? And then another question was asked in the same vein as whether or not the walls can be precast with a radius.
Those are great questions. Let me find my slide and I will discuss it. I went way too fast. Hang on. Am I using the screen? Do I still have the screen?
You should.
Okay, let's see if I get it right here. Getting close. With regard to the radius, next slide maybe. Let's see, here we go. So with regard to the radius, if we were going to be the curb, integral to the curb, we would probably set this system down low. We would provide dowel pockets in the tops of our walls, and we would probably have your contractor pour the curb reveal in place on top of us. That's typically how we would handle that radius, because as you can see, the inside of this system is facing us and all the walls are touching. The outside of the wall is where we get a little bit of separation. Obviously, this is just a schematic. We have a full detail on how you handle that space that's left behind in that radius. And like I said, we can work with you depending on what the configuration is, how we would finish the system on the radius application.
One of the other questions I saw there also was, are the T-walls available locally in terms of locations? And yes, we do have, these are precasted on the West Coast and on the East Coast and in different parts of the country. So wherever we would manufacture the precast walls, they would be shipped locally. We're not going to be shipping T-walls from Maine, for instance, all the way out to California.
I'm just trying to get back to, I lost it. Sorry. I'm sorry to scroll through all these, but I was just going to go back and say, here are where we're located.
Yeah. So
this is where we're available right now.
Exactly.
Nationally.
So any other questions that you see there, Rob or Greg, need to be answered?
There's been a bunch of questions about the garden baffle, which is great. So questions around clogging issues with the porous wall. If it does get clogged, how do you restore the porosity? As a kind of a combination of two questions.
Yeah, well, there's a number of answers. First of all, again, we're used to seeing these in a horizontal application where we're being turned on by cars and vehicles, and we're working material in, and we still see porosity. Remember, this wall is not meant to be a filter. It's not designed as a filter. I don't think you heard us call it a filter. Did we? I don't think so. I never call it a filter. This is meant to be a weep wall. So it's meant to drain down. We're talking about a small area that will drain down over an hour if need be. So even when the slabs are plugged, they still flow at a 5 to 10 inch an hour rate, even when they're plugged. I mean, the sand within the pores will still allow water through. So these things will drain down over time. They will not become a vector issue. That's the whole point. So if the surface area of that forebay becomes plugged and doesn't allow water through, our weir wall will. If trash is pushed up against the wall, again, we're not flowing through like an open outlet or an inlet. Water is just pushing through. At the end of everything, all the pollutants should slough down and slough off of that wall. Again, keeping it open and free. In a worst case scenario, a pressure washer at a 45-degree angle just on the exposed portion of the wall will bring it back basically to new. And under a worst case scenario, just like our panels in the ground, we have lifting points, and the slabs, everything we do removable and replaceable, right? So the porous concrete slabs are removable and replaceable under a worst case scenario out in the gutter line. If all else fails or something unforeseen happens, same thing with these walls. We can always pull one out and get it back in and put everything back together again, peel the media back a little bit. So.
All right, guys. Well, it looks like we're to the end of our time. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I know there's some questions that are still outstanding. We will make sure to address those in a follow-up post-presentation. You see the contact information for myself, for Greg, and for Will on the board. We appreciate your interest in being part of this. It's certainly a system that we're very excited about. And very much look forward to any follow-up from any of you as we move forward. Feel free to reach out, whether that's on pricing, whether you have project opportunities, whatever it may be, like Greg mentioned a few times, webinars or live meetings, depending on what the situation is in your neck of the woods with COVID, and any of the products that we covered today, and then other stormwater solutions we have too. Reach out to us and we will connect you with the appropriate local people or ourselves. And I guess on behalf of my side from Ferguson Waterworks, certainly appreciate your time. And Greg, if you have any closing comments, I'll let you go for it.
Rob, thanks. This is great. Great collaborating with everybody here. Look, we have almost everybody here till the end, so there's definitely interest, and we really appreciate it. Reach out to us. We'll be happy to present to your group one-on-one. We really appreciate this time. This is just really exciting. We're happy to be a part of this whole thing. So thanks.